Elias Crane read the bank's notice at his own kitchen table by lamplight. 60 days to make good on the note, or the Territorial Stock and Land Bank takes the spread his father broke his back to clear. He didn't curse. He folded the paper into quarters, careful, like it might tear. His foreman couldn't cipher past the tally. The herd was short, and Harlan Voss, at the stock auction with 40 men listening, said it loud: "A man who can't count his own cattle has no business holding land." Then, a train whistle. A woman stepped down in a plain traveling coat, a ledger book under her arm instead of a hope chest, and before "how do you do," her eyes were already on his account paper. If you believe love is built with 2 pairs of hands, this story is for you. Subscribe and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The lamp needed trimming. Elias Crane knew it, and he didn't move to do it. He sat at the kitchen table with the wick guttering low, and the shadows swung across the pine boards his father had planed by hand. The notice lay in front of him. He had read it 4 times. The words did not change. 60 days. $1,340. The Territorial Stock and Land Bank, in the person of Mr. Harlan Voss, would hold the note until then, and not one morning longer. He did not curse. His father had cursed enough for 2 lifetimes, and it had never moved a fence post or filled a feed bin. Instead, Elias picked up the paper. He folded it once. Then again, careful, into quarters, pressing the crease flat with his thumb the way you'd smooth a shirt collar before church. He set it on the shelf by the flour tin, as if it were fragile, as if handling it gently might keep it from doing what it meant to do. Outside, the wind came down off the Sable Creek benchland and found every gap in the log walls. It was late October. The cottonwoods along the creek had gone bare a week back. His father had cleared these acres with a mule named Solomon and a mortgage that had outlived the mule, and the man both. His mother lay on the rise behind the barn. His wife, Ellen, lay beside her. 3 winters now, Elias had buried the whole of his family on that little slope and kept the deed to the ground they rested in. And if he could not find $1,340 by Christmas, he would not even own the dirt over their faces. He had counted the herd twice. Wade had counted it once. The numbers came out different every time, and neither of them trusted the pencil enough to say which was right. That was the shame of it. Not the drought, though the drought had done its work. Not the string of 11 head that had gone missing in August, driven off some moonless night by men he'd never catch. A man could weather weather. A man could not weather his own ignorance. Elias could break a horse and dig a well and set a broken leg on a calf, but put a column of figures in front of him, and the numbers swam like minnows. He had left school at 10 to work this ground. Reading came slow. Ciphering came slower. And the bank knew it. He blew out the lamp and went to bed and did not sleep. In the morning he told Wade Tillery about the woman. They were in the barn, forking the last good hay down from the loft, their breath smoking in the cold. Wade stopped with the fork half lifted. "A wife," Wade said. Not a question, more like a word he was testing for weight. "A woman," Elias corrected. "I answered an advertisement. Back in September." He kept his eyes on the hay. A matrimonial notice, out of a Chicago paper Doc Halloran left at the store. I wasn't in my right mind. I just got the first letter from Voss. He forked another load down. I forgot I'd even done it, till the answer came. "She's on the noon train Thursday." Wade was quiet a long moment. Wade was a good hand, the best Elias had ever known with a rope, loyal as a dog, and about as able to read a ledger. He'd been with the Crane place 11 years, and had never once asked for a thing but to keep his bunk. "You can't feed a wife," Wade said finally. It wasn't unkind. It was arithmetic. The only kind Wade could do without a pencil. "I know it. You aim to send her back?" Elias set down the fork. He looked out the barn door at the gray sky, and the brown grass, and the mountains going white on top. "I don't know what I aim to do," he said. "I did a foolish thing in a bad hour. Seems a poor way to treat a woman who crossed half a country. I'll meet the train. I'll tell her the truth. Then I suppose it's hers to decide." The truth. He rolled the word around and did not like the taste. The truth was, he was a broke man who'd sent for a bride he could not keep, in a house with a foreclosure notice folded up next to the flower. Thursday he drove the buckboard into Sable Creek and stood on the platform with his hat in his hands like a boy. The noon train came in loud and threw up steam that hung in the cold air and did not lift. Folks got off. A drummer with 2 sample cases, 2 ranch wives back from Helena with parcels, and then a woman in a plain gray traveling coat, buttoned to the throat, a bonnet without a single ribbon on it. She carried 1 trunk, which the porter set down for her, and under one arm she carried a book. Not a Bible. A ledger. Cloth-bound, thick, its corners worn soft. She was not beautiful the way the men at the saloon meant the word. She was something better and harder to name. She had a straight back and steady eyes, and a face that gave nothing away for free. Late 20s, he judged. She looked at the town once, taking its measure in a single sweep, and then she looked at him, and she knew him for hers before he said a word. "Mr. Crane," she said. "Ma'am." He didn't know where to put his hands. "Miss Ainsworth." "Margaret Ainsworth." "Meg," she said. "If we're to be honest, we may as well be plain." He drove her out to the spread and told her the truth the whole way, because he could not stand to let her walk into the house not knowing. He told her about the note, about the 60 days, about the 11 head gone and the drought and the herd he couldn't count straight. He told her he had no money for a wife, no money for a wedding, no money for a preacher, that he'd sent for her out of a black-minded night, and that she'd every right to be furious and take the next train east, and he'd pay her passage somehow if he had to sell his saddle to do it. She listened. She did not interrupt. When he finished, they were rolling up the last rise before the house came into view, and she said nothing at all, and he thought, well, there it is. I've shamed us both. The house was cold when they went in. He built up the stove. She set her trunk by the door and set her ledger on the table, and it was then that her eyes fell on the folded quarter of paper on the shelf by the flower, and on the account book beside it, the one Wade had scrawled his crooked tallies in. Elias started to apologize again. He got as far as, "I know it's not what you were promised, Mr. Crane." She had crossed to the shelf. She had the account book open in her 2 hands, tilted to the window light, and her eyes were moving down the page fast, faster than any bank clerk he'd ever watched. And something in her face had changed. Sharpened. Woke up. How long has this column been carried wrong? He didn't know what she was pointing at. I couldn't tell you which one's wrong. That's the whole trouble. She looked up at him then. And she said the thing that he would remember for the rest of his life. Plain as a fence rail, no more feeling in it than a woman naming a price for eggs. "I'll balance your books. Ask no ring." She closed the account book over one finger to hold her place. "Feed me, and give me a roof till harvest, and I'll show you where your money's bleeding. That's my offer. Not a wife. A bookkeeper. You've no money for a wedding, and I've no wish for one. But you've got money hidden in these pages you don't even know you have, or money leaking out of them, and either way you need eyes that can find it. Mine can." He stood there with the stove ticking as it warmed. "You'd stay," he said slowly, "and want no marriage. I'd stay till harvest. I'd earn my keep in the only coin I've got." Her chin came up a fraction. "After harvest, if the place is standing, we can speak again. If it's not, you'll owe me nothing but a ticket." He should have felt relief. Part of him did. But part of him, the proud part, the part his father had bred into the bone, curled up small and ashamed that it had come to this. A stranger woman offering to save his land because he could not read his own numbers. But pride was already gone. He'd lost it in Voss's office weeks back. There was nothing left to protect. "All right," Elias said. "Miss Ainsworth." "Meg, all right." She had the books open before supper. She worked at the kitchen table by the good lamp, which she trimmed herself without asking, and she took a pen from her coat pocket and set it beside the ledger. It was a fine pen, bone-handled, yellowed with age and handling, the kind a man might carry a lifetime. It did not match the plainness of the rest of her. Wade came in for supper and stopped in the doorway when he saw a woman at the table with the account book spread out and columns of figures growing under her hand in a script so neat it looked printed. He looked at Elias. Elias shrugged. "How's a woman read ledgers like a bank clerk?" Wade asked. He didn't mean it mean. He was honestly amazed, the way he'd have been amazed by a talking dog. Meg did not look up from her work. "My father kept books in the city," she said. "I helped. That was all." She said it the way you'd swat a fly, without weight, and went back to her figures, and neither man thought to ask her another word about it. City helped her father. That was the whole of it, as far as they knew, and they let it lie. Within the hour she found it. "Here," she said. Elias came and stood at her shoulder, and Wade behind him. She had 2 pages open, and her bone pen tapping a smudged line. "Your herd's been counted twice. This tally here, in June, it's carried forward into the fall count as if they were separate head. Look, same brands, same weights, to the pound. Someone counted the north pasture in the spring and again in September and never crossed off the first number." "So we've got more cattle than I thought," Elias said, and for one bright second his heart came up. "No." She said it gentle, but she said it straight, because she had already learned he was a man you didn't lie to. "You've got fewer. The book showed you a herd that was partly counted twice. Take out the doubles, and you're short. Shorter than you feared, Mr. Crane, by near 40 head on paper that were never in your pasture." The bright second died. Wade swore softly and took off his hat. But Elias stood there and felt something he had not felt since the first letter from the bank. Not hope, exactly, ground. She had handed him a true number. An ugly one, a worse one than the lie he'd been carrying, but true. And a man could stand on a true number. He could plan against it, fight it, work it. You could not fight a lie because it moved under your feet. A true number held still and let you get your boots under you. "You're sure?" he said. "I'm sure." She looked up at him, and for the first time something almost warm passed over her face, gone as quick as it came. "The first thing my father taught me. A number that flatters you is the most expensive kind there is." Word got around Sable Creek fast, the way word does in a town with one street. The broke Crane rancher had sent away for a bride and got a woman who did sums at his kitchen table and slept, folks whispered, in the back room while he slept in the loft. That last part was true, and Elias let them whisper. He had bigger wolves at the door than gossip. Voss was the biggest. The banker rode out himself, 4 days after Meg came, on a blood bay gelding worth more than Elias's whole remuda. He came, he said, to inspect his collateral. He sat the horse in the yard and looked at the barn and the thin fall grass and the cattle standing hip-shot in the cold, and he did the sums a different way, the way a man does who is pricing a thing he means to own. "Crane," he said, not getting down. "I'll be plain. You won't make the note. You know it, I know it. So here's a kindness." He named a figure. It was a buyout for the whole spread, land and stock and buildings, and it was robbery, less than half what the place was worth in a good year. Take it. Walk away with something in your pocket instead of nothing. No shame in a man knowing when he's beat. Meg had come out onto the porch. She stood with her hands folded and her ledger nowhere in sight, and Voss's eyes passed over her the way they'd pass over a rain barrel or a hitching rail. He did not greet her. He did not tip his hat. To Harlan Voss she was furniture the rancher had bought, and cheap furniture at that. I'll make the note, Elias said. Voss smiled the way a man smiles at a child who says he'll fly. With what? Your foreman can't count past his fingers, and you can't count at all. He gathered his reins. The offer stands 9 days. After that, I'll want the full sum or the land. Good day. He rode off. Elias stood in the yard with his jaw tight enough to ache. He never once looked at me, Meg said quietly from the porch. No, ma'am. He wouldn't. Good. She turned to go back inside. A man who doesn't look at you can't see what you're doing. There was something in the way she said it, low and even, that made Elias look at her twice. But she was already through the door, and the wind was rising, and there was work. That Sunday was the church social, held in the yard of the Sable Creek meeting house, with a stock sale after. Because in a cattle town the Lord and the ledger kept the same calendar, Elias would rather have been dragged behind a horse than go. But he had cattle to price against Voss's insult, and Meg said plainly that she wished to see the town, so they went. The town saw them first. They came together in the buckboard, and the whole yard turned to look, and then turned away and put their heads together, and the titter went around like a grass fire. The broke rancher and his bought woman. Elias felt the back of his neck go hot. Meg sat beside him with her back straight and her face still as a Sunday, and if the whispers touched her, she did not show it. It was Voss who said it out loud. He was standing by the stock pens with a knot of men around him, the way money always has men around it, and he raised his voice so it carried clean across the yard, and he said, "There's Crane. Bought himself a bride to count what he hasn't got." A ripple of laughter. Voss warmed to it, though I hear she does sums. Well, it'll take more than a woman's arithmetic to make his ciphers come out. The man's carrying interest at 9% on $1,300 and can't tell you what that comes to by Christmas. The laughter came again, easier, 40 men, near enough, all listening. Elias's hand closed on the buckboard rail. And Meg spoke. She did not raise her voice. She did not stand up on anything or wave her arms. She simply said, into the little silence after the laugh, in a clear, plain carrying tone, $99 and a few cents. To the end of December, at 9% on $1,340. But the rate on the note is 8, missed Voss, not 9. 8%, compounded semi-annually, comes to $88.40 by year's end. You've just quoted your own paper wrong by a full point in front of 40 witnesses. I'd check your clerk's figures, if I were you. A man who misremembers his own interest rate ought to. The yard went silent. Dead silent. The kind of silence that has a weight to it. Voss's ears went red, not his face. His ears, first, 2 red flags rising, while his mouth worked, and nothing came out of it worth saying. Because he did not know if she was right. That was the thing that undid him. He did not know his own rate off the top of his head, and this woman had said it to the dollar and the cent, without a pencil, and 40 men had heard her, and now not one of them was laughing. Parlor tricks. Voss finally got out. Any fool can rattle off numbers. Then it should be easy for you to correct me, Meg said. And waited. He did not correct her. He couldn't. He turned his blood bay and rode out of the yard, and the men made a lane for him, and behind him the whisper started up again, but it was a different whisper now, and it was not about Elias at all. Driving home, Elias could not think what to say. Finally he said, "Is that true? What you told him? To the cent. You did that in your head." "I did that at your kitchen table, 3 nights running, because I wanted to know what we were fighting." She looked out at the passing brown country. The head part is just practice. Anyone can learn it who's not too proud to sit still and do it 1,000 times. A pause. My father wasn't too proud. It was the second time she'd mentioned him. Elias noticed she never said his name. After the social, something turned. Not between them, not yet, though a seed was in the ground. It turned in the work. Meg stopped being a strange woman at his table and became, day by day, the reason the place did not sink. She overhauled the store credit first. Elias had run an account at Dahlgren's Mercantile in town for years, the way every rancher did, buying flour and wire and coffee against the fall beef sale, and he'd never once checked the ledger against his own because he could not read it fast enough to argue. Meg took one afternoon with the Mercantile book and Dahlgren's countercopy side by side and found the hemorrhage. Old Dahlgren wasn't cheating him. Exactly. He was just careless, and careless ran downhill into Elias's pocket. Prices marked up between one visit and the next, with no notice. Interest charged on a bill that had been settled in June. Sacks billed at 50 pounds that weighed 40. It was $30 over the year. $30 was a milk cow. $30 was a month of hay. She sat across the counter from Dahlgren, not angry, just certain, her bone pen ticking down the column, and by the time she was done, the old man was mopping his forehead and crediting the account and swearing it was an honest mistake, and Meg said she was sure it was. And that from now on, she'd be by the first of every month to keep them both honest. Dahlgren, to his credit, laughed and said she was welcome, and after that the Crane account did not leak a nickel. Then the hay. The winter hay contract was the thing that could break a small outfit in a bad year, and this was a bad year. Elias had a handshake deal with a man named Sorensen up the valley, so many tons at so much a ton, delivered by first snow. Meg read the tally sheets from the last 3 winters and found that Elias had been paying by the load, and the loads had been getting lighter. She rode up to Sorensen's herself, with Wade driving because it wasn't fit country for a woman alone, and she came back with the contract rewritten to pay by the Wade ton, scaled at the town stockyard, and Sorensen not too happy about it, but shaking on it, because she'd shown him his own figures, and there's no arguing a man out of his own figures. Wade came in that night and said to Elias, low, so she wouldn't hear from the back room I didn't trust it. A woman and her book learning. I'll say that plain. I didn't. He turned his hat in his hands. But I watched her back Sorensen into a corner without raising her voice, and Sorensen's a hard man. She's saved us more this month than I earn in a year. He put his hat on. I don't rightly know what to make of her. But I trust the numbers. Hers. Anyhow. That was a great deal from Wade. The calf came in the middle of November. It was a fall calf, born late and small, and it took the scours in a cold snap, the kind of sickness that wrings the water out of a young thing and leaves it a rack of bones by morning, if no one sits with it. Elias found it down in the barn near midnight, and he'd have said, a month before, that no bookkeeper woman would trouble herself with a sick calf in the dark. He was wrong. Meg came out in her coat, over her nightdress with a lantern, and did not flinch at the mess of it. She'd nursed animals before, she said, and Elias didn't ask where or when. She mixed the calf a drench of what they had, warm water, and a spoon of molasses, and a pinch of salt, the old remedy, and she got down in the straw and held the calf's head in her lap and dosed it a swallow at a time. All night, while Elias built the fire in the barn stove and fed it and watched her hands. He watched her hands more than the calf. They were a bookkeeper's hands, quick and sure, but they were gentle on the animal the same way they were sure on the page. And there was something in that. A woman being careful with a dumb sick thing at 2 a.m, with no one to see it but him. That got into Elias's chest and would not come out. By dawn the calf lifted its head on its own and bawled for its mother. Meg stood up, stiff, straw in her hair, and looked down at it and said, "There, that's your interest paid." And Elias laughed, tired and grateful, and it was the first time he'd laughed in the house since Ellen died. He started noticing things after that. He noticed she took her coffee black, no sugar, though sugar was one thing they had. He noticed she worked best by the east window in the morning and moved the lamp to the west side after dark. He noticed she owned 2 dresses, both gray, both mended, and that she mended them herself by the fire with the same neat hand she kept the books. He noticed that when the wind was high, she'd stop and listen to it, just for a moment, like it was saying something. One night, without deciding to, he called her Meg instead of ma'am. "Just cold tonight, Meg." She looked up, surprised, and something moved behind her eyes, and she said, "It is," and looked back down at her work. But her ears had gone a little pink, and Elias felt it in his own chest, that pink, like it was catching. But she kept the harvest between them, like a fence. Every time the work drew them close, every time a thing was easy and warm at the table, she'd find some way to say it. Till harvest. Our arrangement runs to harvest. As if reminding them both. As if there were a wall she'd built and meant to keep, and Elias could not for the life of him see what was behind it, only that it was there, and that she stood on the far side of it even when she was standing right beside him. The extension paper came due on the 20th of November. The bank had granted him 30 days back in October, a mercy Voss had made a show of, and that 30 days was up. To keep the note alive, Elias needed the bank to sign a new extension, 60 days more. And everyone knew the bank would not sign it. Voss wanted the land. He'd say no, and then the clock would run out at Christmas, and that would be that. Elias meant to go himself. He put on his good shirt the night before and sat cleaning his boots by the fire, and he was rehearsing in his head the humble words a man says when he goes to be refused, when Meg set down her pen. "You're not going," she said. He looked up. "It's my note. It's your note, and you can't read it." She said it flat, no cruelty in it, just true, and it landed like a slap all the same. "You'll stand at that counter, and Voss will quote you figures, and you'll have to take his word because you can't check them, and he knows it, and that's exactly how he means to beat you. He beats men who can't read the paper." She closed the ledger and stood. "I'm going. Alone. With this." She laid her hand flat on the account book. "I've found something, Mr. Crane, something in your note. I don't want to say what till I've stood at the counter and made them show me the original in their own hand. But I think I can buy you 60 days. Not beg them. Buy them." With their own mistake, Elias sat with the boot brush in his hand. Every proud bone in his body told him to say no, that a man did not send a woman to fight his bank for him, that the whole town would say Crane hid behind a skirt. And then he thought of Voss's ears going red in the churchyard. He thought of the true number she'd handed him that first night. He thought of her hands on the sick calf in the dark. "What did you find?" he asked. "Come with me tomorrow and watch me lay it down," she said. "But don't say a word inside. Not one. Whatever they say to you, however they try to bait you, let me do the talking. Can you do that? Can you stand there and stay quiet and trust me?" It was the hardest thing she could have asked a man like Elias Crane. Stand still. Stay quiet. Trust someone else with the thing that was his. He set down the brush. "I can try," he said. She almost smiled. "Trying's most of it." They drove into Sable Creek the next morning, under a sky the color of dirty wool, first snow spitting sideways off the mountains. The bank was warm and hushed, and smelled of ink and money. Voss came out of his office when he saw who it was, and his mouth was already curling, and behind the counter his clerk, a thin, nervous man named Pruitt, straightened his cuffs and would not meet anyone's eye. Meg walked to the counter. She set her father's bone-handled pen down on the wood, quiet, deliberate, like a gambler laying down a card. She opened her ledger to a page she'd marked, and she said, in a voice that carried to every corner of that still room, "Mr. Voss, before you refuse my husband's extension, I'd like you to have your clerk bring out the original note, because by my reckoning your bank has been charging Elias Crane compound interest that his note never authorized, and I can show you the line where it started." Behind the counter, the clerk Pruitt went the color of tallow, and his hand, reaching for the ledger drawer, was shaking. Voss did not sit. He stood behind his big desk with his knuckles on the wood, and he looked at Meg the way a man looks at a dog that has learned a trick he doesn't like. "Pruitt," he said. "Bring the note." The clerk didn't move. His hand was still on the drawer pull. It was shaking so hard the brass rattled. "Pruitt," Voss said it again, softer, and that was worse. The clerk brought the note. He laid it on the counter and stepped back like it might bite him. Meg smoothed it flat with 2 fingers. She set her ledger beside it. Then she read. She read the way her father must have taught her, before the papers, before St. Louis, before any of it. She put 1 finger under a line of Voss's own writing, and she read it aloud so the whole warm room could hear. 8%, she said. That's the note. That's what Elias Crane signed. 8%, simple, on $1,340. She turned a page. But here. And here. And here again. Your clerk carried it at 9. 9%, compounded, 30 days back in October. And the 20th of November. Each time, 9 where the paper says 8. Elias stood by the door and said nothing. It was the hardest work he'd ever done, standing there. His hands wanted to be doing. He kept them still. Voss laughed. It came out thin. $1 here, $1 there, he said. You'd drag a bank through the mud over a clerk's slip of the pen. $30 over the year, Meg said. Not a slip. A pattern. She looked up at him, and her voice never rose. Not once. A slip happens once. Mr. Voss, this happened every time the interest came due. That isn't a mistake. That's a method. The word sat in the room. Voss's eyes went to Pruitt. Just for a second. But Meg saw it, and Elias saw her see it, and something in the shape of the morning changed. You'll extend the note 60 days, Meg said. In writing. Before these 2 clerks at the desk who've heard every word. Or, my husband takes this ledger and this note to the territorial office in Bozeman, and you can explain the difference between 8 and 9 to a magistrate who ciphers as well as I do. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Then Voss reached for his pen. He wrote the extension in a hand that pressed too hard. He signed it. He turned it so she could read it, and she read every word before she let Elias near it, and only then did she nod, once, and hand her husband the pen to sign his own name. They drove home through the snow with the paper folded in Meg's coat. Elias didn't speak till they crossed the creek. 60 days, he said. You bought me 60 days. I bought you a start, she said. The rest we earn. That night he built her the desk. He'd been gathering the boards for weeks, quiet about it, planed and stacked behind the barn where she wouldn't look. He set it under the window in the front room, where the morning light came in over the rise where Ellen was buried. He built it plain and square and strong. He built her a shelf for the finished ledgers and a slot for the bone-handled pen. When it was done, he stood back and rubbed his neck, embarrassed, and said it was nothing, just some scrapboards. Meg ran her hand along the top of it. She didn't say much either. But she moved her ledger there that same night, and her pen, and after that the lamp in the front window burned late, and Elias, coming in from graining the horses, would see her bent over the books with her hair coming loose, and he'd stand in the dark yard a minute before he went in. Just to look. He'd taken to skipping supper. There was work that couldn't wait, or he told himself there was, and money that couldn't be spent on a man eating twice what he'd earned. He thought nobody noticed, but a plate started appearing, covered with a cloth, warm on the back of the stove, beans and a heel of bread, and sometimes a little bacon. He never caught her doing it. She never mentioned it. He ate every bite and washed the plate and set it back, and that was a whole conversation neither of them ever spoke out loud. He learned she took her coffee black, no sugar, though sugar was there. He started pouring it the way she liked it without asking, and the first morning he set it down right, she looked at the cup, then at him, and something crossed her face that she put away fast. Samuel Reed came calling on a Sunday. He was a good man. Everyone said so. And it was true. Widower like Elias, but with bottomland that never failed and no note against it, and a quiet, decent way about him. He sat in the front room with his hat on his knee, and he talked to Meg like she was a person and not a curiosity, and Elias, out at the woodpile pretending he had cause to be, could hear the low murmur of it through the wall. Reed asked her plain. Elias didn't hear the words, but he knew the shape of them. A name, a settled house, no ledgers at midnight, no bank sniffing at the door. Safety, everything Elias couldn't put on the table. Meg came out onto the porch after Reed rode off. She stood there a while in the cold. "He's a kind man," she said. "He is," Elias said. His voice came out like gravel. She waited. She gave him the whole silence to fill. All he had to do was ask her to stay. One sentence. He stood there with his mother's ring cold in his vest pocket where it had ridden for 3 winters, and he could not make his mouth do it. Because a man with 60 borrowed days and a mortgage didn't ask a woman to tie herself to a sinking thing. That was what he told himself. That it was decency. It wasn't. It was fear wearing decency's coat. "You should think on it," he said. She looked at him a long moment. Then she went inside, and the lamp came on at the desk, and the pen started scratching, and it scratched most of that night. She reconstructed the whole year while he slept. A clean set of books, every head of cattle, every dollar of credit, the hay and the feed and the loss, all of it laid out fair, so that when the beef buyer came, she could show him a solvent ranch and not a beggar's. She did it for Elias. She did it for the land. She told herself she was only being useful, because usefulness was the only thing she'd ever been allowed to offer, and it was safer than the other thing. The other thing came 4 days later, on the noon train. He came into Dahlgren's store in a checked vest with a drummer's easy smile, a traveling man out of St. Louis with a case of notions and a loud voice. Meg was at the counter settling the store account. Elias was 2 aisles back with a coil of wire. The drummer looked at Meg once, then again, and his smile changed. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Margaret Ainsworth. As I live and breathe," loud, for the room. "Boys, you know who this is? This is the Ainsworth girl, out of the St. Louis papers. Her daddy's store went under, and the books were cooked 6 ways from Sunday, and didn't they say it was the daughter kept the ledgers? Ran off west before the sheriff could. That's enough," Elias said. But it was out. Dahlgren had heard it. 2 women by the dry goods had heard it. And by the time the wire was paid for it, was walking up and down Sable Creek on its own legs, and by evening it had reached the bank, and Harlan Voss received it like a gift. He came out to the ranch himself the next morning. He did not get down from his buggy. "The extension is void," he said. He said it almost gently, and that was the cruelty of it. Obtained by fraud. The audit's the work of a proven embezzler. It's in the St. Louis record. Plain as day. No magistrate in the territory will let a woman like that overturn an honest bank's paper. He looked at Elias with something close to pity. 60 days ran out the minute I learned her name. I'll have the spread by spring. "I'm sorry, Crane. I truly am." He wasn't. But he drove off believing it was done. Meg was packing when Elias came inside. The trunk was open by the door, the same trunk she'd carried off the train. She'd folded her 2 dresses. She was reaching for the pen when he stopped in the doorway. "Don't," he said. "It has to be me that goes," she said, not turning around. "As long as I'm here, he has the story. My name against yours in the same breath, and he ruins us both. If I'm gone, I'm just a hired woman he sent away, and you're a rancher who was fooled. You can fight that. You can't fight the other." Her voice was very steady. She'd had practice at leaving. "I'll take the trunk and the pen. The ledgers stay. They're yours. They were always yours. Meg." "There's a noon train Thursday." She closed the trunk. "It's better this way. It's the only way that leaves you standing." She would not look at him. She was protecting him, and she was doing it the only way she'd ever learned, by making herself small and going quiet and disappearing, and there was nothing he could say that she hadn't already said to herself 100 times on 100 nights. He let her go to the depot. God help him, he let her get all the way there. He sat at her desk with his head in his hands, and the finished ledgers were stacked in front of him, clean and square, and he couldn't read them. Not really. Not the way she could. He was a man who couldn't cipher past a tally. That was the whole shame of his life. And then Wade Tillery came in stamping snow off his boots, and Wade said the thing that turned it. "You just gonna let her ride out?" "What am I supposed to do, Wade?" "She's right. Her name's Poison." "Vassal, her numbers never lied to us once," Wade said. 11 years he'd worked that place, and he'd never spoken to Elias like this. "Not once, Elias, yours always did. You couldn't tell me if we had 10 head or 11. She could tell you to the dollar what every one of them ate. And you're gonna take a banker's word over hers?" Elias looked down at the ledger she'd worked till dawn. There was a notation in the margin. In her small, clear hand. He couldn't read fast, but he could read slow, and he made himself read it, word by word, and what it said stopped his heart. Same hand carries the 9s. Look at the loops. Compare Pruitt's foreclosure column, 6 years back, Olive Street, St. Louis, same hooked 9. He did it there. He did it here. She'd seen it in the night and hadn't had time to say it. The clerk. Pruitt, the nervous man who wouldn't meet an eye. He'd been carrying the 9 for 8, not just against Elias, but against every failing spread in the valley, skimming the difference into the bank's own foreclosure accounts for years. The drought hadn't broken these ranchers alone. A clerk's hooked 9 had helped. And that same hand, that same trick, had once been worked in a mercantile on Olive Street in St. Louis, and a girl named Margaret Ainsworth had been blamed for it because she was the one who kept the books and couldn't prove she hadn't. One skill cleared the ranch and cleared her name in the same stroke. She'd found it, and she'd been about to hand it over, and instead she'd packed her trunk to save him from it. Elias was out the door before Wade finished his breath. He reached the depot as the whistle blew up the valley. She was on the platform with the trunk at her feet, the pen in her coat, her face composed the way people compose their faces at gravesides. "You're not getting on that train," he said. "Elias, you wrote it down." He had the ledger under his arm. He'd carried it 2 miles, without knowing he'd picked it up. The 9s, Pruitt, St. Louis. You wrote it in the margin, and you were going to give it to me, and then you packed your trunk instead. He was breathing hard. "You didn't cook your father's books. That clerk did. The same one bleeding this whole valley. You've been carrying another man's crime 3 winters and running from it, and you'd have got on that train and kept running to save me a little trouble." Her composure cracked down the middle. "If I stay, and I'm wrong, you're not wrong. You've never once been wrong." He held out the ledger. "Come tell the magistrate." Not to perform for anybody. The ledger needs the person who wrote it. "Come home and finish it, Meg." The train came in. It sat there breathing steam. And it left again without her. The hearing was set for the following week, in the long room over the feed store where the territorial magistrate held court when he rode through. He was a gray man in spectacles who'd ridden 2 days to get there, and he had no interest in Sable Creek's opinions. He had interest in figures. That was the whole mercy of him. The benches filled. 40 men, near enough, the same 40 who'd stood in the churchyard and heard Voss say a man who couldn't count his cattle had no business holding land. They came to see it end. Wade sat in the back with his hat on his knee. Samuel Reed came and took a seat along the wall, quiet. Dahlgren was there, and Sorensen, and the drummer in the checked vest, come to watch his gossip do its work. Voss arrived certain. He wore his good coat. He had Pruitt beside him carrying the bank's books, and he sat like a man attending a formality. Meg walked to the front table with her father's pen in her hand. She set 2 ledgers down side by side. Hers and the bank's. She'd asked for the bank's under the magistrate's order, and Voss had let it come because he was certain there was nothing in it a woman could turn against him. That certainty was the seed of the whole thing, and it was about to grow up through the floor. "Your Honor," she said, "may I show you the 8 and the 9. She walked him through it line by line. She had a voice made for it, level, unhurried, the voice of someone reading truth off a page and expecting to be believed because the page didn't lie. 8% on the note. 9 in the ledger. 30 days back in October. The 20th of November. She showed the overcharge on the Crane account, $88.40 where it should have been $99 and a few cents the other way. She showed the difference and where it went. Then she turned to the bank's own book to the foreclosure column, and she showed the same 9 over and over across account after account Valley Ranchers Voss had squeezed dry. The difference, she said, went here. Into a suspense line nobody audited. Skimmed, a few dollars at a time, off men who couldn't cipher well enough to catch it. Voss stood up. "Your Honor, this is grotesque. This woman was accused of this exact crime in St. Louis, a proven fraud. Her figures prove nothing. They're the invention of a practiced liar dressing up a bank clerk's arithmetic to save a bankrupt rancher. You'd take her word?" "No," Meg said. "You'd take the hand." She laid 2 more things on the magistrate's table. One was the St. Louis clipping, folded soft from years inside her ledger, the paper that had chased her 1,000 miles west. She laid it flat. Beside it she laid a single page torn clean from the bank's own book, a page in the clerk's hand. "Look at the 9s, she said. "In St. Louis, 6 years back, on Olive Street. And here, in Sable Creek, this October. The same hooked tail. A man's hand is a signature whether he means it or not. The person who cooked my father's books and let me take the blame is the same person who has been cooking this bank's. He came west, same as I did, only he came to keep working." She did not look at Pruitt. She looked at Voss. "Your ledger lies, Mistis. Voss, mine never learned how." The room turned. You could feel it turn, 40 men leaning the same way at once, like wheat in a wind. The magistrate took up the 2 papers. He held them to the window light. He looked a long time. Then he set them down and looked at the clerk. "Mr. Pruitt," he said, "come up here and write the number 9. Pruitt didn't move. His face had gone the color of tallow, the same color it went the day at the counter, and his hands were flat on his knees and pressing down like he could hold himself in his seat by force. "Mr. Pruitt, I only did what I was told." It came out of the clerk in a rush, cracked and high. "The suspense line. He told me where to carry it. He said it was the bank's due. He said nobody would. I only did the writing. It was his. It was Mr. Voss's. Be quiet," Voss said. It was his scheme. In St. Louis it was a different man, but here it was him. He told me which accounts. He wanted the land, the whole valley. There's a syndicate. Pruitt was standing now, white, spilling all of it, 6 years of it, because the only thing left to save was himself, and he'd do it by drowning the man beside him. I never touched the girl's father's books. That was another clerk. I only knew the trick from him. I swear to God I never. Sit down, the magistrate said, and Pruitt sat, and the room was so quiet you could hear the stove tick. Voss did not sit. He stood there in his good coat, and you could watch the certainty go out of him in stages. First the bluster. He opened his mouth to say the thing that had always worked, the word of a bank against the word of a woman, and he found the word wasn't in his mouth anymore. Then his eyes went around the room, looking for the 40 men who'd laughed with him in the churchyard, and not one of them would meet his eye, the same way Pruitt had never met anyone's, and Voss understood in that moment exactly how that felt. Then, the silence took him. He just stood, a big man in a good coat, holding on to the back of a chair, while the thing he'd built came apart in the plain arithmetic of a woman he'd called furniture. The magistrate took off his spectacles and cleaned them and put them back on. "The Crane foreclosure is void," he said. "The extension stands, and it won't be needed, because I'm ruling the compounded charges illegal and struck. I'm opening an inquiry into every foreclosure account this bank has carried the last 6 years." He looked at Voss over the tops of the spectacles. "And I'll want the names of your syndicate, sir. Any purchase offer made against these accounts is void from today. You'll not be buying this valley cheap. You'll be lucky to keep your charter." Wade Tillery, in the back, took off his hat and held it against his chest like a man in church. Samuel Reed watched Elias look at Meg. He watched the whole of it cross Elias's face, the fear going, the shame going, the thing underneath coming up plain for anyone to read. And Samuel Reed, who was a good man and had wanted a settled wife and a quiet house, saw that he'd been asking for something that already belonged somewhere else. He picked up his hat. He nodded, once, to no one in particular, and he stepped back against the wall and let it be. 4 days later, Elias signed the cleared note at the bank counter. It was the same counter where his father had signed the mortgage 30-odd years back, in the days when the bank had a different name and an honest man behind the desk. Elias stood where his father had stood. He picked up the pen. Voss was gone. There was a new man there under the magistrate's eye, and the room felt different, cleaner. He went to sign, and his hand was shaking too hard to make the letters. Meg put her father's pen in his fingers. The bone-handled one. She closed his hand around it. "Slow," she said. "It's just your name. You know your name." He signed it slow. Elias Crane. The note marked paid, $1,340, cleared. The spread was his, free and clear. The acres his father had broken his back on, and no man in the territory could take them now. She'd saved the land before she'd ever let him win her. Exactly the way it should have gone, though neither of them would ever have said a thing like that out loud. The first real snow came late that October, and it was on the porch, by the desk he'd built, that he finally asked. He didn't make a speech. He wasn't a speech-making man. He took his mother's plain gold ring out of his vest. It had ridden there 3 winters, next to nothing, next to a folded foreclosure notice once, and he set it down on the closed ledger between them. Just set it there, on the cover of the book that had saved him, where she'd see it. "You balanced my books," he said. "I'm asking for the ring now. Not because I owe you. I don't owe you. You cleared that. You cleared all of it." He had to stop. He started again. "I couldn't ask before. I had nothing, and a man doesn't ask a woman onto a sinking thing. But it's not sinking now. It's mine, and I've got it because of you. And I can't count a single good thing in my life that isn't you." He looked at the ring on the ledger. "I couldn't count much of anything before you. Turns out that was the trouble." Meg looked at the ring a long time. Then she reached into her coat and took out a paper, worn soft, folded and refolded. The original terms. No ring. Feed me and give me a roof till harvest. The bargain she'd struck at that kitchen table so she'd never have to ask for more than usefulness, because usefulness was the only love she'd believed she was allowed. She tore it in 2. Then in 2 again. She let the pieces go into the snow off the edge of the porch, and they were gone the way snow takes things, soft and complete. She didn't say yes. She looked at him, and her eyes were wet, and she gave him back his own question, the one he'd been too afraid to ask at the depot, the one word that had been between them since the platform. "Stay?" "I'm staying," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. Neither are you." He picked up the ring off the ledger and he put it on her hand, and her hand was steady, steadier than his, the way it had always been. They married that fall, in the small church where Voss had once mocked them, and near 40 of the men who'd heard that mockery came and stood witness to the other thing. 1 year on, it was spring again, and the calving went clean. The herd tallied right, Meg counted it, and Wade drove it, and the number in the book was the number in the field, which had not been true on the Crane place in longer than anyone could remember. The paid note hung framed on the wall by the door, where a man could see it coming and going, and be glad. The desk by the window was hers, and the front room lamp still burned late over it, and the bone-handled pen still scratched, only now it signed different things. It had signed a marriage register, in the fall. That spring it signed a birth entry, in Meg's own clear hand, a name written careful into the book of the family, the way her father must once have taught her, before the papers, before any of it, back when keeping a record was just a way of saying, this happened. This is true. This is ours. Wade Tillery brought his own accounts to the porch office to be sorted, and sat with his hat off while she did it, and didn't say a word about book learning ever again. Voss was gone from the valley, the inquiry ran its course, and the bank came under a new charter and honest men, and the other foreclosed ranchers, the ones the Hooked Nine had helped to ruin, got their hearings too. Samuel Reed married a schoolteacher out of Bozeman that June, a good match, and he came to the wedding before it and raised his glass to the Cranes with no shadow on his face at all. A neighbor stood with Elias at the rail one evening, watching the light go off the rise where 3 graves lay and a 4th generation slept warm in the house. The neighbor was one of the 40. He'd been in the churchyard. He'd heard Voss. Never would have figured it, the man said. The whole town thought Crane was finished, sending off for a wife like that, and she turns out to cipher like a bank. Elias watched the light a while before he answered. Turns out she could count, he said. I couldn't count on much. Before her. The lamp came on in the front window behind them, warm and steady, the pen already moving. Comment the city you're watching from. I'd like to see how far this one travels.